They don't always seem to manage to achieve that, as black people from Joy Gardner to Jean-Charles de Menezes and protesters from Blair Peach to Ian Tomlinson can testify. The police also aimed at having a deeper and more routine involvement in working class people's lives. And we've seen over the years the way that's impacted on every movement for change. We saw in the 1970s the framing of the pickets at Shrewsbury, the Shrewsbury 24, and the killing as a result of his treatment in prison of Des Warren, and there's still no transparency over that. We've seen the way that mass police violence was essential to Thatcher's victories over the miners, print workers and more. We've seen the way that the police have been involved in illegal blacklisting of trade unionists and the left, the way undercover cops have spied on victims of police violence and anyone who challenged the establishment, even raping women activists they spied on. And I want to talk today about the dangers of rising surveillance and repression that we face. And it's timely to do so. We've got an unelected Prime Minister in Boris Johnson, a man who wanted to use water cannon against Londoners, who now promises 20,000 more police powers, more stop and search, more prison places. And this is happening in a context where we know that the unfolding climate catastrophe is likely to lead to some sort of social breakdown, where we have a choice between whether we get the changes we need to stop climate change, or whether we face repression from the state and from people like the eco-fascists trying to keep the mass of us down. At the moment in Greater Manchester, the police are rolling out a thing called Project Servitor, and the idea of that, if you've not come across it, is that they stand in public places in uniform leafleting the public. And if you don't take a leaflet, they send undercover police to follow you around and watch what you're doing. This surveillance and harassment of anybody who's had bad experiences with the police, which inevitably is disproportionately anybody black, working class people, and so on. And also those with conditions which make such engagement uncomfortable. And that's happening as we speak in Manchester. We live in a country with millions of CCTV cameras and now facial recognition being rolled out without proper regulation. We still have on the statute books the Terrorism Act 2010, which defines terrorism so widely it would include not just Nelson Mandela but even Gandhi. It's good news that the government is now reviewing the PREVENT strategy that's been responsible for harassing and intimidating Muslims who take an interest in politics and treats radicalisation as an issue of psychology and safeguarding, ignoring real injustices from Palestine to Iraq. So it's good news that that's finally under review. But unfortunately, there are people on the right lobbying that instead of it being closed down, it should be extended to the Labour movement and the left. So you may have seen there's a right-wing think tank called the Policy Exchange, which recently published a report called Extinction Rebellion, trying to paint the non-violent Extinction Rebellion campaign as if it was a terrorist threat, demanding more police powers, more surveillance, firmer, which means more violent, policing, more arrests and more prosecutions. There's been a little less publicity around a report from the UK Commission for Countering Extremism, which published a report on the far left, which it labels as extremists and also a potential terrorist threat, despite acknowledging that there's no history of terrorism on the British left. And I want to read to you 5 statements they use to measure people being far left. I want to see how many people agree with them. So if you agree with them, perhaps raise your hands and we can see what a bunch of extremists you all are. Capitalism is essentially bad and must be destroyed. Industry should produce for need and not for profit. This country needs revolutionary change. The wealthy make life worse for the rest of us. I would like to see workers rise up against their bosses. Now these 5 statements, the people who wrote this report were horrified to find that most people in Britain agree with at least some of these. But instead of them concluding that these are reasonable opinions, they conclude that these are extremist from a certain point of view, which is presumably the point of view of 21st century McCarthyites. Now, these reports may be laughable, but the surveillance and repression are no laughing matter. They lead to people losing their privacy, their livelihoods, their jobs, their liberty, and in some cases their lives. So the fight for liberty and democracy that people were fighting for 200 years ago continues. And at the heart of that, we have to have solidarity with the Muslims and migrants who today face the most extreme surveillance and repression. So solidarity.
Give a wave to the van over there that's filming us all. Police van says safer roads in Great Manchester. So there's no welcome without it.